Hi, boys and girls. So today we are going to do something a little bit different, and we are going to take a virtual field trip. And as you know, our virtual field trips were one of our favorite things to do in class. We got to go and see a lot of different places and a lot of different things. And I thought that it would be fun for us to kind of do some virtual field trips here. So I know that it is a little bit different, but I encourage you to put this in full screen and just kind of go along with what we're doing. So today isn't a 360 virtual field trip. We will be taking some of those as well. But today, what we're going to do is we're going to do the constitutional walking tour, which is what you can do in Philadelphia. And we don't actually live that far away from Philadelphia. So if you ever get the chance to do this or have already done this, that is awesome. I'll be honest, I haven't actually gotten to do the full tour myself, even though we do live kind of close. I've been able to do pieces of it. But what this basically does is it shows you a lot of the important parts, a lot of the important sites that have to do with the Constitution or with our, founding fathers, things like that. So I hope that you enjoy this. I thought it would just be something fun for us to get to do together, and I hope that you enjoy it. So I'm going to make my face go away here. So we have the virtual field trip of historic Philadelphia. And a little bit about Philadelphia here. Philadelphia is the fifth largest city in the United States and the second largest city on the East Coast. Approximately 5.8 million people live in the Philadelphia metro. So let's go down here. So this is Independence National Historical Park. So established in 1948, Independence National Historical Park covers more than 51 acres in Center City, Philadelphia. So it's kind of right in the middle. And it celebrates America's birthplace at some of the most important historical sites in the United States, such as Independence Hall and the Liberty Bell. So here is the constitutional walking tour map, and we're going to go see all of these places. So you start over here, and you start at the Independence Visitor Center. And that's right here. And we'll go to see the President's House, Declaration House, which is right here. Here's the President's House. Then we'll go see Signers Walk. We'll get to see the Liberty Bell Center, Independence Hall. So we'll go right here. This is Independence Hall, Congress Hall, Old City Hall, Signers Garden, Philosophical Hall, Library Hall, the Second Bank of the U.S., Carpenter's Hall over here, the New Hall Military Museum, the First Bank of the United States, Franklin Court, and Be Free Franklin Post Office is right here, Christ Church, Betsy Ross House, Arch Street Friends Meeting House, Christ Church Burial Ground, and the National Constitution Center. And now you may not know what all of these places are, and that's completely okay. We're going to get to kind of explore a little bit about them. So this is the Independence Visitor Center. So if you were doing the walking tour, this right here is where you would start. And it gives you a lot of historical background of Philadelphia. So some of that information that you would get to find out there, it was founded by William Penn in 1682. It was America's birthplace. That's what it's known as. So it's the meeting place of America's founding fathers. So the gentlemen that were in charge of basically determining how our country was going to be formed, they met in Philadelphia. It grew into the largest city in the American colonies, and it was the capital city of the United States from 1790 to 1800. So Washington, D.C. is currently our capital, but Philadelphia was our capital for 10 years. So this is the President's House. This is a predecessor to the White House. So basically before the White House happened, this is where the president lived, which is pretty cool. So it's where George Washington, also, this is not the exact house. This is basically where you would go to see a little bit about it. So it's where George Washington and John Adams resided while serving as the President of the United States. Some of the features, there's exhibit on Washington's slaves that served in the house, as well as the free African American community in Philadelphia. This is actually the foundation, the original foundation of the President's House. So the actual house is no longer there, but this is the foundation where that was built. You can kind of see sort of the bricks here that were built, and it's not huge. The part that they have here is not huge. This is the slavery memorial. So these are some of the slaves who actually served in that house, because George Washington did have slaves. As we know, slavery was a pretty common part of the United States at that point. And we are actually going to go visit George Washington's Mount Vernon home at a future point. But this is a memorial to those slaves. This is a person. This is the Philadelphia Plant Life mural wall. So as you can see, it's a painting of different plant life, and it's one of thousands of murals in Philadelphia. But it depicts local plant life, including plants that gave the name to some of Philadelphia's first streets. So some of Philadelphia's earliest streets were named after different plants that they actually found in Philadelphia. Because remember, Philadelphia was not always the huge city that it is. It used to be an area where there were a lot more wildlife. So that was what some of it was named. Philadelphia was the first planned city in America, though. They actually planned on making it a city. So that right there is the U.S. Federal Courthouse. Justice, the Guardian of Liberty. That's what it says here, the Guardian of Liberty. So it's where the U.S. District Court meets, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. It says that only the United States Supreme Court is superior. Basically what this is it's a courthouse that is it's federally run, so it's run by the government, and it rules over a specific spots of Pennsylvania. So it goes over Delaware, District of New Jersey, Eastern District of Pennsylvania, Middle and Western District of Pennsylvania, and then the District of the Virgin Islands. So those are some areas. Basically, judges work here, and they're in charge of determining, if laws have been broken and the whole court system. The only court that is higher than this is the Supreme Court, which we learned about is one of the branches of the government. So that is what it does. There are 14 active judges who work here. So this is Declaration House. This is the place where Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. So look at the house. This very house is where it was written, and they have part of the Declaration of Independence written here, which is pretty cool. So it is a reconstruction, but it looks a lot like the actual house that was there, and it is built right where that house was built. So that actual house is no longer standing. It was too unsafe. It ended up being completely torn down, but they tried to reconstruct it as much as possible. It is owned by someone called Jacob Graff right now, but this is where he lived when he wrote where Thomas Jefferson lived when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. So you are allowed to actually go inside, and they tried to recreate what they knew his house would probably look like. So this is his bedchamber. This is, his bedroom, and what that probably looked like at that time. This is his parlor. A parlor at that point was where you would entertain guests. Oftentimes you would eat with guests in that room. And it was kind of like a living room, dining room combined at that point in time. You can see the little table here. And like I said, you can actually go inside this house if you go into Philadelphia. This is Signer's Walk. So they have plaques, and each plaque commemorates one of the 56 members of the Continental Congress who risked their lives, reputations, and fortunes by signing the Declaration of Independence in 1776 and 1777. So the Declaration of Independence is what was written to basically say that we were an independent country. We were no longer going to answer to Great Britain. We were no longer going to answer to anyone. We wanted to become our own country. And it says here that they risked their lives, reputations, and fortunes because they did. A lot of people were very against us becoming our own country. People who lived in other countries such as Britain and people who lived here were very against it, and they wanted to continue living under the rule of England. So they were risking their lives. They were risking their reputations. Lots of people basically said that they were crazy, and they refused to ever listen to anything they said again because they chose to do this. And their fortunes, some of them were very well-off rich men who ended up not being rich by the time that they died because no one wanted anything to do with them because they signed the Declaration of Independence. So they were very brave. They did something that was really hard so that we could have an independent country. So there is a plaque for each of them. So this is Thomas Jefferson. Each plaque basically has like an engraving that looks sort of like them. It also has their signature because each of them signed the Declaration of Independence. So we do know what their signature looked like. It has their occupation and the colony that they were from. So his occupation was a politician, obviously, and he was from Virginia. So there's a plaque for every single one of the 56 signers. Some of the 56 signers we know a lot about, such as Thomas Jefferson, but some of them we don't know as much about. So it's a really neat place to just go walk and see. So this is Congress Hall. This is the former U.S. Capitol and the site of 2 presidential inaugurations. So it used to be the Capitol building, you know what the Capitol building looks like now in D.C., and 2 presidents actually became president here. So it was the meeting site, the meeting place of the United States Congress from 1790 to 1800. So that was that time where Philadelphia was the capital. And Washington, when he was elected as president the second time, and Adams, they were both inaugurated there. So some pretty cool stuff happened in this building. The Bill of Rights was also ratified here. Remember, we talked about the Bill of Rights. And we talked about how it was a really important document that, you know, we looked at some of those rights. It basically tells us what we are allowed to do and the rights that we have and the freedoms that we are allowed to have. And ratified means basically signed or given consent to. So it was said, okay, this Bill of Rights is going to happen. It is the law now. So that also happened here, which is pretty cool. This is Congress Hall. This is the Senate chamber on the second floor. So this is where, you know, some of those members of Congress actually worked. This is the Liberty Bell. So this is the icon of American freedom. So a little bit of history about the Liberty Bell. Ever since the city began, Philadelphia used its city bell to make people know about meetings or danger or anything like that. And the first bell hung behind Independence Hall. But in 1751, they built a bell tower, and they decided to look for a bell that could be heard from far away because Philadelphia was getting much bigger. And they said that they wanted the words, proclaim liberty through all the land to all the inhabitants thereof. They wanted that to be engraved on it. So they paid someone for the bell, and today it would have cost around $36,400, which included taking it to Philadelphia and insuring it so that if anything happened to it, it would, you know, be taken care of. So the reason why this bell became famous was a writer named George Lippard. So on January 2nd, 1847, he made a story, and he wrote a story about an old man on July 4th, 1776. And he was sitting sadly by the bell, afraid that Congress wouldn't be able to declare independence. But suddenly a young boy came to tell the old man to ring the bell. The story was reprinted, and people often thought of the Liberty Bell and the Declaration of Independence, you know, together. So they kind of made a link between those two things. So that was the legend, that it was rung when they adopted the Declaration of Independence. Now, that did not actually happen. It was rung 4 days later on July 8th to celebrate the first public reading of the document. So they rang it to tell everyone, hey, we're going to read this Declaration of Independence, and we're going to celebrate the fact that we're an independent country. Then in 1777, British forces entered Philadelphia, and it was hidden in a church in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and then it cracked at some point in the 1800s. There are different legends or traditions about when it cracked, but it did crack at some point. And the last time they rang it was on George Washington's birthday in 1846, which is when it cracked irreparably. So they could no longer fix it, and it was going to break if they continued to ring it. So it was moved, and now it is here. So it weighs about 2,000 pounds. And it was purchased in 1751, and like I said, it was believed to have rung to announce the first public reading of the Declaration of Independence. And then it is a symbol of the abolitionist movement. Philadelphia was a place where many slaves came to become free, because Pennsylvania was a free state. We did not believe in slavery. So they would come here and, think about it. It is the Liberty Bell. Liberty means being free. So it was known as basically a symbol of them coming here and being free. So here is a hairline crack. You can see it. This is one of the first cracks that happened. And this crack wasn't such a big deal. This is where they tried to repair it, and then obviously that did not work. So that's where they had to stop ringing it. So it says the Liberty Bell became a vibrant symbol. Now this is actually this exhibit is right there by the Liberty Bell where you can see it. Like a religious relic, the Liberty Bell attracted huge crowds as it traveled throughout the nation. People wanted not only to see it, but to touch it, kiss it, and sit on it. The recognizable image of the bell was used to sell a wide variety of products. As a marketing tool, it linked political liberty with economic prosperity. Used on stamps, in political campaigns, and in many other ways, the bell became an everyday reminder of liberties variously conceived. And you can actually see old pictures of the Liberty Bell at that exhibit, which is pretty neat. Here is a picture. This is women's Liberty Bell, so it was used to try to support women suffragists. And it was used to, remember we talked about how women had to try to fight to vote, and they also had to fight to do a lot of other things. And so this is actually a replica of the actual Liberty Bell. This is not the actual Liberty Bell, but they made like a copy of it, and they were trying to fight for women's rights, and they would drive it around in parades. So this is Independence Hall. This is what's called the birthplace of America. So it was built in 1732 to serve as the Pennsylvania State House. It is the building where America declared independence from Great Britain. That is the building where this document happened, where we finally became a free country. It was also where the Constitution of the United States was drafted, debated, and signed. So if you remember, we read about the Constitution of the United States. We read about how it took them a couple weeks to write it, and this is where those couple of weeks were spent debating over it, talking about if they agreed on the laws, and actually writing it. So that is where all of this important stuff happened. It's a really awesome building. This is the courtroom of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And this is Independence Hall. So this is the assembly room, and they kind of have it set up to look as if it would have looked back when they were actually writing the Constitution. So that's kind of how they think it would have looked. But you can actually go in there, which is pretty cool. This is the Rising Sun Chair, and it's known as George Washington's chair, and it's in Independence Hall, and he used this chair for nearly 3 months of continuous sessions. So basically he sat in this a whole lot, and it's known as Rising, and they've talked about, is it a rising sun or a setting sun? But that's why it's famous. This is the chair that he sat in when they were basically figuring out everything that was going to happen. This is an inkstand that they believe, it's historical, that he may have used. So this is a George Washington statue outside of Independence Hall. Obviously, pretty important person. This is Old City Hall, the former home of the United States Supreme Court. So remember we talked about how the Supreme Court, they are in charge of basically judging. They're part of helping us to pass laws, helping us to determine if we're following laws, things like that. This is where that used to be. So it was the meeting place of the United States Supreme Court from 1971 to 1800. John Jay is famous. He served as the first Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court from 1789 to 1795. And basically what a Chief Justice does, they're the top judge of the Supreme Court. So they kind of help to do all of the the judging part of things, basically, before the Supreme Court. So that's what he was in charge of. This is Signer's Garden. Here's people who are mimicking that. This is also dedicated to those who risked their lives for the cause of American freedom. So as you can see, it looks like he has a document and a pen. That is also for those 56 people who risked their lives and their reputations and everything to sign the Declaration of Independence. So this is a statue inspired by Philadelphia merchant George Clymer, who signed both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. So that is really cool. He was not only in charge, he helped to make sure that America would be a free country, but he also helped give it its laws. So pretty important person. And it commemorates the spirits of all of those who devoted their lives to the cause of American freedom. So not just the signers, but pretty much anyone who has devoted their life to the freedom of the United States. This is Philosophical Hall. It's the oldest scholarly society in the United States. It was founded, basically Ben Franklin came up with this idea that he thought that there should be a place where people who had really good ideas, could sit and talk about it. And they could talk about those ideas, they could come up with ideas, they could think through them, they could debate them. And he thought that there should be a place where they could go and do that freely. Where he basically before, if you remember, before there was independence, there was no constitution saying that you could have freedom of speech. So you could get in trouble for what you were saying. So here was a place where he thought that you should be allowed to speak freely and talk about these ideas with people. So it was a home for thinkers to discuss important topics, including business, politics, law, science, government, and health. And Ben Franklin had come up with the idea, and it was fostered in 1743. This is Library Hall. It was the nation's first public lending library and the former Library of Congress. So it was also founded by Ben Franklin. He was a pretty cool guy, huh? And it served as the Library of Congress from 1774 to 1800. And basically the Library of Congress is now in Washington, D.C. And it is a research library, and it serves the United States Congress. So if the United States Congress has to research something, that is where they would go. It has millions of books. It's the largest library in the world. It has recordings, photos, newspapers, manuscripts. It has all kinds of things. So if the U.S. Congress needs to research something, whether it be a law or something that happened, an event in history, that is where they would go. And I'm sure that things have changed somewhat with internet access, but remember, they didn't have internet back then either, so they had to rely only on things that were written down. So it served as that from 1774 to 1800. The statue of Franklin above the main entrance symbolizes his views on government. He was a very educated man. He believed a lot in, being able to talk about those things and educate yourself on things.